and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests of the 8th Annual Investment Meeting Conference, under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Vice President and Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates and ruler of Dubai, an initiative of UAE Ministry of Economy. This afternoon, we will be joined by experts and key stakeholders to discuss many insights and analysis of the future of economy, impact of globalization, and development of FDI, without forgetting the new technologies such as blockchain. We will now begin our second plenary session titled A New Wave of Economic Opportunity and Digital Innovation, Understanding the Promise of Blockchain. Please join me in welcoming the moderator of this session, Mr. Henrik van Schiel from Switzerland, known as the father of Industry 4.0 and leading authority on competitiveness.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, welcome to this session, a wave of economic opportunities and innovation on understanding the promises of blockchain. So before I introduce our panelists and the topic, let me first thank you that we have the opportunity to be here. It's an exciting period. It's exciting to be in Dubai. A lot of things are happening in Dubai. Last night when I drove in, it was 1.5 years ago since I was in Dubai, and I was totally flabbergasted. Every time I come by here, it's just changing. Every time it's just changing so fast. Changes happen extremely fast in Dubai. So when you live in Dubai, you will need to adapt to changes. And the reasons why I'm telling you this story is to get a little bit into the topic that we have here on blockchain and the promise within blockchain. So let me just introduce everybody we have here. We have His Excellency. Right here, he's the CEO of Dubai Future Foundation. It's an honor to have him here. He's also, if we look on the adoption of blockchain, I think Dubai is the early adopter and also probably the most advanced one. So we will ask a little bit deep diving into how that is working, what are the best practices around it, and what can you take away from this. This is some good insights that we get from here. Then we have Richard Teng, who's the CEO of Abu Dhabi Global Markets, who's the regulatory authority around it. And you know, it's a privilege to have him here because the challenge when you talk blockchain, you automatically talk about the legal, the regulatory aspects, and the operational aspects, and it's a fine balance that you work. He's on the leading edge on this. He has been around that for the last, let me check, I think it was 20 years.
No.
No, not that old. Good. Then we have Nick. No, not Nick.
This is Nick.
Yeah, Nick. He just joined the panel on behalf of somebody else that jumped off. It's our privilege to have him here. He is the specialist in token, in blockchain, and in capital market, and raising capital for it, and in doing the social aspects around it. He will also introduce himself a little bit later. Then we have Adel Fernandez. He is a business development manager at Advanced ESRI, who is a geographical intelligence company. And he is mainly focusing on how they use blockchain in agriculture, transportation. So we will hear about that and how that works. And then we have our last panelist is Nick Harachi.
Yes, exactly.
He's also a fellow Dane. He has, the last 12 years, he has experience in the capital market, raising funds, hedge funds, and he has a dedicated fund that is focusing on blockchain and raising capital for that. I think it's 500 million in Asia.
Already, yeah.
Yeah. So He will cover the investment part and the trading part. And so before we kick off, let me just ask the audience, how many of you know what blockchain is? How many of you have invested in Bitcoin? Good. So when you look at the chart that we just put up, just to put it into perspective when we talk about blockchain. So when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, there are 17 main pillars that are driving a dramatic transformation across all industries. It puts away the industry borders, and it changes the competitiveness, the growth ability, and the productivity in companies, nations, how we trade, how we live, and affects every aspect of our life. Now, we have gone through the first aspects, Internet of Things. We have gone through several of these aspects. The main elements that are like fire to the caveman, just think about that, is blockchain is one of them. Artificial intelligence is one of them. Blockchain will change the way we do business and trade. Artificial intelligence is changing the way we are trading. Just to give you an introduction to these elements, and they are not just, when I started in the beginning with Dubai, it's not just a small change, it's a huge change, and it will affect all of us. So before we start the questions, in 2015, when I was at the World Economic Forum, I made the prediction that by 2025, there will be more trade in the market on digital currency than on physical aspects. Now, this shift has happened this year. This is a big, big change. And we don't have 2025. This is a big, big change coming. And even faster than what we thought it's coming. So let me turn the question over to Richard. What is blockchain? Can you put it in normal layman terms? What is blockchain?
So I can't help but notice I'm the only regulator on the stage, and as my chairman has warned, regulators are utterly boring. But I'll try to explain in layman terms what is blockchain. So if you promise your wife that you're going to buy a 2-carat diamond for your 10-year wedding anniversary, if she keep that piece of information to herself, she become a single repository of data and information, and possibly a single point of failure. However, if she tells that piece of good news, share it with her parents, her siblings, her colleagues, her boss, and similarly to your parents, your siblings, your boss, and your colleagues, she has effectively created a decentralized, immutable blockchain concept that makes it very embarrassing for you to back off from that promise. And if she somehow managed to get your bank account details or credit card details, then she can effectively create a smart contract for payment of that 2-carat diamond. So in a very layman term, that's my explanation of blockchain.
I like it. I like it. When you want to have it a little bit of technical explanation, it's a little bit when you look at, you have a buyer, you have a technology, and you have a seller. And between this is the blockchain technology. The blockchain technology is a ledger. Normally you have a buyer, a broker, a seller, and you have no aspects towards it. Now you have, I'm buying something, it identifies me, it identifies who's the seller, that he has the money, I'm willing to pay for it, we're both anonymous, and it will make the trade. And it consists of a contracting that is within it. So this is the strong, strong power that is within blockchain. So, Richard, let me ask you another question. So when everybody talks about blockchain, they immediately go to Bitcoin and currency. What is blockchain more than just currency?
So Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are some of blockchain's most famous applications, but it goes way beyond that. because it's a secured ledger of transactions that, as Hendrik mentioned, you can undertake future transactions of it. Highly trusted, it's decentralized. It can create many different values. Within the financial services sector alone, if you look at it, you have use cases in remittance space, for instance. You have use cases in securities trading, which is huge in terms of transformation. It is a value driver in terms of operational simplification. You have many different functions. They are very data heavy within financial services, and it goes beyond financial services, as you mentioned. The World Economic Forum has predicted that by year 2025, the year that you mentioned, you'll see more than 10% of global GDP that's recorded on blockchain. I do think that based on the pace of adoption, it's going to exceed that much faster. So we're going to see more adoption in that space. If you look at trade finance, I believe you're going to discuss that in detail later. There are so many different users for it. ICOs, happy to discuss that later. But there are so many different applications, and it has the ability to transform the business models. You have many different businessmen, middlemen now, that's standing in between transactions that is needed for transaction validation, verification. If you look at the securities market, all those could be disintermediated going forward. So it's going to be quite huge for financial services, together with biometrics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, as well as blockchain. Together, I do think that they're going to form the financial architecture of the future as we continue to reimagine how financial services industry will look like.
Yes. So I actually like this. It will bring down 30% of the cost in the financial sector, in the infrastructure. It will reframe the trading aspects, a new frame from trading. So His Excellence, when we look at Dubai, they're normally always one step ahead of everybody, both because they have the cash, they have the ideas, and they have the brain power. So what are you doing about blockchain?
Okay, first of all, thank you, and I'm honored to be here with my fellow panelists. And I believe if we want to understand blockchain, the people sitting on my left are definitely more equipped to give you the technicalities, but we are a platform, and maybe give you an idea of what the Dubai Future Foundation is. The Dubai Future Foundation has been set up around 2 years ago, launched by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE, ruler of Dubai, and chaired by His Highness Sheikh Hamdan bin Rashid, Crown Prince, and the Chairman of Board of Trustees of the Dubai Future Foundation. And the whole setup of the foundation is to really put Dubai ahead in the game when it comes to future planning for governments. And based on this visionary action, obviously technology is a key factor when it comes to future thinking. And clearly, we try to focus on technologies that really will have a long-term disruptive impact on any ecosystem. And from what you've heard, blockchain is obviously that, and we want to also, as part of being a leading government, we would want to act as a lab for the world in really testing and prototyping those disruptive ideas. What we've done with blockchain is we've run it through one of our programs at the Dubai Future Foundation, which is the Dubai Future Accelerators. And this program is not your typical accelerator. It's a program where we try to link global innovations from all over the world that have the capability to disrupt and change government processes. And the way we do this is that in that program, we tied up with 12 government entities, sector agnostic, whether it was road and transportation, health, the police, the municipality. They are actually part of that accelerator program. And they launch challenges that will disrupt the process within their sector. Clearly, blockchain played a big role in those processes, and we've outreached for different startups from all over the world to really try and hack the best way to really implement blockchain technologies through all those sectors. And I think this was found extremely valuable by by the government entities and the startups, because this ends up being a win-win situation where we've really brought different innovations and tied them up with government entities, which is something not easy to find for early ventures.
So are you doing smart contracting for entrepreneurs? Are you doing smart contracting for oil and gas in a closed community?
So based on what we've received from an appetite, and this also goes back to our visionary leaders, our government has set targets to us, and one of them is to become 100% on blockchain whenever we transact any government transaction.
Yeah.
Which means that by 2020, if I were to purchase a land from you, I'd have to do this through blockchain, and any other transactions within government entities. So those targets set enables different startups to really come and prototype different ideas. We have a company, and I believe they were supposed to be a panelist as well with us, Consensus. They as an outcome from that acceleration program, they ended up tying up with Smart Dubai office, who are also pushing the blockchain mandate through Dr. Aisha bin Bishr, their Director General, to really excel the blockchain program forward. So we tie up with different startups, we test different things, and in hope to get contracts and results at the end of the cohort.
Very, very interesting. I mean, like, because, you know, I always, when I talk to governments and leaders, I always see the concept of blockchain that you can do, you can invest in currencies, you can invest in companies, you can invest in smart contracting, you can invest in closed contracts, which is a community that knows each other. You can invest in smart contracting, which is an open community. So you have new communities where you have to have, it's a more advanced aspect of a ledger, because you need to verify them before they enter into the community.
Absolutely.
And then you have the next leg, which is a more advanced one, is how do you, in a smart contracting, combine the currencies together that you can actually pay, so that governments can pay out people, but that governments can also, from a pension fund perspective, give out ledgers as a credit.
Absolutely, absolutely.
As a housing credit, like you mentioned, or other aspects. So this is already, from a thinking, quite advanced what they're doing here in Dubai, just to give you the overarching picture.
Sure.
So Richard, before we come to you guys, Richard, this is not an easy aspect. I mean, like, if I just mentioned these 5 legs, I mean, like, most governments or most aspects are just investigating the first ones. I mean, like, from a regulatory perspective, that's a nightmare.
It is. It is. So regulators always have the challenge of trying to keep up with innovation, right? So if you look at, for example, ICO space, let's discuss that. If you look at that, last year alone, you see more funds raised by startup via ICOs than through traditional private equity. Telegram has recently raised $1.7 billion via ICOs. So again, there are a lot of new technological advances we were discussing before we started the panel, but a lot of regulators are not yet really embracing this area, are not really supporting some of this innovation coming through, kicking the can down the road. For example, cryptos. If you look at how cryptos are being regulated throughout the world, there are some that has banned them, there are some that try not to regulate them, try not to touch them, think that it's just a fad that might go away, so pushing the problem down the road. But what if they are here to stay? If they are here to stay, you need to have proper regulatory framework to regulate them, to give trust, integrity to your investors, not only in the retail space, the accredited space, but also the institutional space, right? So that is a key challenge with regulations, even on blockchain, because of the decentralized nature of it. There's no central authority. How do you regulate them properly? How do you make sure there's proper standards and maintain those standards, right, going forward? Who do you go after if something goes wrong? So there are a whole multitude of issues that regulators face. I do think that if you look at the regulatory space, Abu Dhabi Global Market is at the forefront of embracing innovation. By now, we are ranked the top financial center within the MENA region in terms of fintech and embracing fintech. That's a research by Deloitte of 44 cities around the world. We are the first to start issuing license to fintech players, the first to create a regulatory sandbox. We call it regulatory laboratory. By now, we have close to 20 firms in our regulatory laboratory, in ICO space, in blockchain, DLT space, in biometrics, smart contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And we have issued guidance on ICOs, how we're going to regulate asset securitization, on cryptocurrencies, where we have interested players approaching us, to collectively formulate a framework that is good enough to address risks such as custody risk. You see coins being stolen. To address risks of market misconduct, to address risks, to ensure that institutional investors feel enough credibility to participate in that space. Right? So we are looking at the various aspects of it, giving them credibility, and addressing the risks at the same time.
Go ahead.
Sorry, but if you allow me to add on the regulation as well. From our side, we looked at it also in another way. We believed, obviously, to make sure that something like this really takes off, we need to first put people that are related to this disruption into one room. So we formed the Blockchain Council around a year and a half ago through the Dubai Future Foundation, which consists of almost 48 members from different sectors, whether from the foundation, whether it was venture capitalists, accelerators, government authorities, banks, and met with them to really try and identify what are the best policies and procedures really to embrace something as disruptive as blockchain. The other thing that we are working on as well is a policy accelerator. What we've realized from the Dubai Future Foundation is that startups and entrepreneurs, whether blockchain, AI, autonomous driving, so on and so forth, those are the technologies that really are taking us through the fourth industrial revolution. We realized that for them, helping them accelerate the policy is far more valuable than actually equity financing that technology. They can find finance from all over the world if they can validate their technology, but not everywhere in the world where they can have the Director General of Road and Transportation sitting with them in the same room, working on a blueprint to set up air taxi. This is what we provided them at the Dubai Future Accelerators. And what we want to do is once the technology is really identified, we want to create this policy accelerator program where we still get the same decision makers in the same room to take this policy forward and come up with an official regulation that people can really abide by. And I think this sets an example of how future thinking the government is. And going back to our Future Foundation, which was actually a showpiece in the World Government Summit 2 years ago with 6 employees, and now we are almost reaching 80 by the end of the year, really focusing on coming up with different ideas to really test different things that no other government is willing to test in a very risk-measured way.
Yeah. So how do you see that will affect trade? Or will Dubai just do it as an internal element, or do you think that you're able to use this as a trading element?
So I will, but I'll leave the trade to the gentleman on my left. But obviously, the key highlights in trade is efficiency and being able to authenticate and having processes much faster. But what we've learned, really, the lessons that we've learned from this is, in order to take something like this forward, you really have to have the people in the room sharing the same mindset that you do have. If they don't have the mindset, whether they are government authorities, they don't really get the vision that His Highness has put for us to really put us in that leadership role when it comes to innovation, they can act as bottlenecks. But thankfully, all the government entities that we've worked with really understand the message from His Highness and understand the risk profiling in deploying capital either through investments or even through awarding contracts, because at the end of the day, in the accelerator program, we have the carrot at the end of the cohort is a contract awarded from the government entity to that startup. if the government entity does that, it means that it really understands that they're giving that money or that contract and accepting that risk. This is not a procurement typical process where you're looking at a company that has been validated or has a specific track record. You need to accept that 8 or 9 out of 10 of those innovations may not work. But most importantly, the moment you sign a contract with a successful story, you set a track record, and the quality of the deal flow that comes to you becomes even more and more efficient. But again, in order to do that, the people in the room should really understand and have the same mindset. So that's the challenge that we had to work with, but thankfully everyone was aligned.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. Now I'm just going to turn over to you, Nico, because you know the interesting aspect is when you hear how it works, a high risk profile where they're willing to invest and to fail in order to have a learning process into it. You have your own investment fund that you're setting up currently, right now, focusing on blockchain. So how can people invest in blockchain? What are the options out in the market?
Many options. First of all, also, thank you for inviting me to this exciting conference. I think it's the biggest conference I've ever seen, visited, and luckily to be a part of. Very exciting. I also think it's extremely exciting to be here speaking on blockchain, smart contracts, which is going to revolutionize the world. I represent Smart Contract Capital, and what we are, I mean, when I heard about blockchain the first time, and smart contract, it was very hard to actually understand it the first 5, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour. I was very lucky that a very close friend of mine is one of the key people at Consensus, so he really took the time to explain it to me. Now, we all here do believe that the blockchain is going to change the world, basically the Internet 3.0. So there are lots and lots of opportunity to make money on it, earn on it. But I would think more importantly is that when all of you invest into blockchain or crypto, you actually add to the ecosystem. And right now, the ecosystem of, let's say if you look at the cryptocurrencies alone, is today have a valuation around $280 billion, which if you look at it compared to the last time I checked on Apple, it's a long time ago, but they were around 600 billion. So it's amazing how much interest, how much recognition the industry has as such, but still, I would say a little bit not enough understanding. And I really liked your question in the beginning, Henrik, when you asked how many people understand blockchain and how many people actually own Bitcoin. Could you ask that again, because there are more people in the room to actually see how many of you already invested into cryptocurrencies or blockchain? Could you raise your hands? Well, so what we did at Smart Contract Capital is really that we would like to bridge traditional investors that have heard about blockchain, smart contract, wanting to invest in it, but maybe don't know really how to get access. And that is what we do at Smart Contract Capital.
So, Nick, you are also focusing on token. What is the difference between, which value add is there in token?
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create the infrastructure that enables new capital to flow into the crypto community. So the great thing about cryptocurrencies is this concept of being able to tokenize value in lots of different ways. So if you think of anything you may own or anything you want to own, so if you own something specifically which is yours, a ring was mentioned earlier, technically you can tokenize that. What you can also do is if you own something a bit bigger than a ring, maybe you have a jewelry shop, you can tokenize and syndicate the value of those assets in the shop itself, and the assets within the jewelry that you may have in the drawers and what have you. So what it enables you to do, unlike fiat currency, dollar and sterling, where you only have 2 decimal places, In the world of crypto, you can have as many decimal places as you like. And it means you can create fractional ownership of things, which means that given the attributes of blockchain, which is about transparency, speed of transaction processing, there's no center, there's no central authority that's going to hold anything up. But if you think about how you can tokenize value and how you can exchange value, then, you know, trade and commerce, as has been said earlier, is going to be completely different to what you think it is today.
So let me just ask by just raising the hands, how many in the audience really know what token is?
Well, yeah. That was one.
And you know, it's a difficult thing because we are in, so many words are just being pushed around as buzzwords. And when you really understand, so what does a token really mean? Can you just give an ABC on token, just a simple way, just explain it via the bottleneck or whatever?
So this is a token, okay? Paper money. It's a token of a store of value. And what is behind money? Quite often, it's a promissory note from a government that says, you know, they will underwrite that has some intrinsic value. Now, most of the world, when it moved away from the gold standard, means that the government's support of currency is become weaker and weaker and weaker. So what a token is I can create something which is a store of value that we can all exchange between ourselves. It's a piece of software in a sense. It's a set of rules. It's a set of software contracts that define how that value is exchanged. And in a sense, if you think of what Bitcoin is a tradable cryptocurrency, but why does it have value? Well, it has value because we give it value. It has some underlying value to create a Bitcoin. You have to burn a lot of electricity. But over and above that, it's like most assets. We give it value as a crowd, gold, platinum. We give it the value, and it's up to us as a community. If you get behind crypto, ultimately it will take over from fiat currency as confidence grows.
Yeah. Here comes an interesting fact. So when you see, it's very well explained. So, you know, a leader in the market normally has a blind spot. And when you look on saying blockchain focused on currencies, tokens, smart contracting, but who's actually jumping on the wagon? The GCCs jumping on the wagon because they're not dependent on the central banks. Every country that is depending on a central bank to write a blank check is not jumping on the wagon. How come they're not doing it? That's exactly the reason why. Because writing a blank check that is not backed up by something annihilates the main idea is that if I come in with my $100, can I actually get the value of what you write on the paper? Or should I just put another zero on it? I mean, like, this is the main idea, one of the big revolutions that happens behind it. And that's why, so the leader's dilemma of not looking in the mirror because they are so focused on the front is exactly where Dubai is already stepping one step ahead. And before the rest of one will actually wake up, they will be surprised. So just to elaborate on what Nick just mentioned, tokens on the social aspects are really, really merging very, very big in Africa. When you look at the microeconomy that works in Africa, it actually, the next step will work on token. The next step in the microeconomy around Europe and the other will work on token. It's the social aspect that works on token. Adel, I haven't come to you yet. So I'm going to ask you the difficult question.
Go ahead.
What is the promise within cybersecurity and blockchain?
Well, so on our side, as we work for Esri, basically, which is the leading geospatial company in the world, providing software solutions and all kind of, all sectors, across sectors for the government, to do with things such as land information, transport, and whatnot, and cybersecurity being one of these spaces that we work in. So we come from the problem space, basically. We come from the area where we see the need for having that kind of technology being adopted and used. From our sense, it would be the geospatial side of things. In terms of cybersecurity, we see a lot like that. That's a major concern. That's a discussion we were having before. It's a major concern amongst companies nowadays, amongst countries nowadays and governments on how to tackle cybersecurity. And amongst I think a statistic was that around 2020 or 2021, around $6 billion are going to be used, going to be spent on cybersecurity, cybersecurity aspect around the world. Now that's a great amount of money to talk about, and blockchain here plays that fundamental, pivotal role that enables us to control that space. Well, not control it, but more of decentralize it and make it more of a safe haven for people to trade within. As we were saying as well before, as we were mentioning that since people are dealing with one another, there's more of a trust outside of the centralized system, which enables people essentially to stay anonymous, as you were saying earlier on, not be exposed as if it were. Today, if you go into things like meetings, you practically Google people and LinkedIn. You see people online, you see their activity. You can draw these links very easily. Today, that holds lots of pros and cons. Obviously, the pros are, easy access, connectivity to the rest of the world. But on the other hand, as well, the cons play very much into the space of people giving away a lot of the privacy, although people don't want to do that, but people are obliged to do it by the corporate structure that is around the world. Today, blockchain enables that to be anonymous, allows all these transactions to happen in small bits around, not centralized, not coming back to one hub where you put basically your life story, all your details, your personal details online.
So does everybody understand in the audience what the promise is in blockchain and cybersecurity? Just raise your hands if you think you understand it. So the real promise that is behind blockchain and cybersecurity, the weakest link of all these 17 pillars is cybersecurity. It's the weakest link, and it will pull down the entire house. The promise of blockchain resides in because you have two elements of players, and you have a ledger of code that is being changed forth and back consistently. Just think about everybody of us in the room. We have a phone that is based on 32 bits. Actually, the phone is 64 bits, but it only operates on 62 bits. So that means everybody of us, without really knowing, could exchange a code every 3 seconds between each other. Our cybersecurity has been based on the last 20 years, so we're doing catching up. So the only thing is that we're doing with the blockchain, it enables us, if we are willing to connect it with a ledger, I can consistently go wherever I go, and when I'm over there, I'm exchanging code with these two people. And when I'm over there, I'm exchanging code. So nobody knows, but we consistently exchange codes, and that creates a level of security that is actually needed today. So this was quite well explained. So Nico and Nick, I'm just going to ask you two a question too before I'm going to open up for the audience if you have some questions. So Nick, you have an investment company that invests in blockchain as well?
We have a number of companies. So we have an ICO platform. So our job there really is to create the token of value, the store of value around your business proposition and get it to market. We also have a crypto exchange, and that will focus on trading tokens that are classed as securities. And you heard the regulatory view there. In our view, most tokens are securities because they behave like a financial instrument to pool and exchange value. I'm also making a TV miniseries about 21 million, called 21 million, about the Bitcoin revolution, because we want to tell a story before Hollywood gets in there first and tells the wrong story. So we're very well invested in this space, and we're trying to create the infrastructure for the investment community. Many of you in this room may be new to blockchain, new to crypto, but you're thinking about, do I get involved? Do I invest? Will I lose my money? Is it very volatile? And all of those things. And we're trying to create a series of infrastructure to make it look more conventional. And we also invest ourselves in various projects. And I announced a deal last night with a gentleman over there who owns a business called Bingeable, where we invested in. It's a video-on-demand platform that's going to change Hollywood and change the way you consume content. And we made an investment in them last night. So, yeah, we're active.
Congratulations. Nico?
Well, we only own 2 companies, but we believe they fit into the value chain. As I said to you all before, is that when I heard about blockchain the first time, it was a very big issue. It was how is blockchain gonna change the world? How is it gonna benefit everybody in the world? But more interesting, how do you actually create these cryptocurrencies? And let's look at Bitcoin or Ether, the main 2 cryptocurrencies. And they're being generated on a farm. Well, not really a farm that we know with cows and chickens, but a digital farm. So the first thing we set up was a farm in Iceland where we bought lots of hardware. Well, first actually I bought one little computer and it started generating money. I mean, that was amazing. But the good thing is it still generates money. And this contributes to the ecosystem of the blockchain, of the ledger. It's very difficult to really give a comprehensive insight and understanding of the whole blockchain, smart contract, and crypto universe. But what we do, and I think then the second company is obviously our smart contract capital, which is basically a hedge fund only investing into crypto. I think what is important is that the market is very volatile. It's volatile in the sense that it is still immature, it's still young, but I highly believe that there's still great profits to be made. And I think that anyone that would invest into the blockchain, into crypto, is ultimately helping the world. You're contributing to the ecosystem.
Thank you very much. So I will open up for 2 questions from the audience. If not, I will take a small conclusion. Yes? Just speak up. So I think the best way who could answer that question would be Richard. But I'm working with governments where the central bank is taking on the cryptocurrency, and they want to have the private equity, they want to have the banks, the insurances, and the brokers, and the custodians, all aligned in one. This is what is called a closed system, because you only invite people into it. You just don't do with anybody else. So anybody who comes into the system is selected, approved, profiled, every part of their body, forth and back. So Richard, you can probably answer that question.
No, I think you answered it perfectly. But I'm just going to add on to say that blockchain and DLT hold a lot of promises. But there are still some challenges that we need to overcome, and that's part of the challenge. Other challenges include, if you look at it, the throughput. The current processing rate now, I think, is still too low in terms of trying to process the hundreds of millions of transactions that takes place, let's say within financial services, for instance, right? Why do you have a permission-based system like you mentioned? attempts to try to address some of those challenges. So that's one challenge. The other challenge, if you look at it, is interoperability, because there are different blockchain models out there. How do you make sure there's some standardized approach? How do you share proper governance? How do you create common standards? As I mentioned, one of the key regulatory challenge going forward for regulators is when there's a lack of a central authority. If something goes wrong, who do we go after? Who is responsible for creating, maintaining standards, and assuring that those standards keep up to date, right? Are kept current and relevant. So those are indeed some challenges. Government have started to try to experiment blockchain DLT solutions for clearing and settlement purposes, right? So the exchanges have done that. So if you look at this year, Deutsche, Australia Stock Exchange, DTCC have used blockchain for some of their post-trade services, including collateral management. Abu Dhabi Exchange have used it for corporate actions. So governments have tried to do it, Singapore, Canada, I believe UK, Hong Kong. But at this point in time, they've concluded that it's not matured enough to replace some of the underlying system that they have. At least that's the initial conclusion. But as it continues to evolve quickly, that solution will take place, right? To be able to process the type of magnitude of transaction that's needed to support financial services.
Thank you very much. So I will just conclude. So you have spent here 1 hour, and I will just conclude for you so you have a view on what you actually learned from it. So you heard His Excellence, and you heard Richard Teng. They are within, when you think about how you can use blockchain, from smart contracting to currencies to token, they are the service end of it. They are trying new service models, new value models. So value models has to be because there's two, a buy and a set. So you need somebody who's very strong from legal and regulatory aspects. These two go hand in hand like twins. I recommend them for what they're doing because they're leading edge. They're trying to do that. So when you want to do something in blockchain, think about a business model that needs to fit and a service model that needs to, how you want to service each other. Because that will create a higher revenue model, a differentiated, a core differentiating service and value model. This is how you're going to create revenue. Then you heard from over here, you heard about tokens, you heard about cryptocurrencies, and you heard about investments. So if you want to invest in blockchain, there's two ways that you can invest. One way is that you go in and you go into and buying the specific elements in the currencies, in Bitcoin, and Ethereum, and so on. Or you could say, good, I'm going into a fund, a foundation, or I'm going into private investment into somebody I believe. There's actually two of them here who both raise funds and they profile companies and invest in companies. When you invest in blockchain, in the broad plan of blockchain, you see three different areas of segmentations. You see one segmentation which is for early adopters. Gives a high return above 20%, but it's high risk. They are willing to do mistakes and learn and fail, but they have the first advantage. Then you have the industry specialist. Just look, smart contracting is going into financing, insurance, banking, and all these aspects. They're very, very big, very strong. You can expect a return from a fund there from around 10 to 15% because they're industry specific. Then you have the very end of it, where everybody actually, the normal funds resides within. That's where you can get 2 to 6% when you're lucky. Because there's a lot of them around it. That's actually called when everybody has a token. When everybody has a token. So just listen to what Nick said. You have to have a special aspect in your token that has a social aspect to it. You have to have a business model. So this was about a service model and a value model. This was about an operating model and a performance model and a cost model, because that is where the performance is driven in. So that's these two aspects that you heard in. I hope everybody of you got a little bit out of it. The session here was for you, so you could see what effect it will have on trade. I'm often sitting with a lot of country leaders and governments, and they have a very difficult time to grasp it.
And if there are any blockchain companies out there, please reach us at our website, the foundation's website. If there are chances for you to really disrupt and link up with government entities, I think your odds will be high with the Dubai Future Foundation, so we're all open.
So please give them a hand, and thank you very much for your time.